The prime steak that you think that you're getting, the filet that you think you're getting, may actually be pieces of stew meat that have been glued together.
Have you ever ordered a steak at a chain restaurant and felt like something about the texture just wasn't right? There was a time when going out for steak meant something, a treat, a splurge, a meal you could trust. But what if the cuts we're served today aren't quite what they seem to be? Today at the Hidden Menu, we take a deep dive into what might really be on your plate. So let us start with 1. Applebee's. Applebee's used to be the kind of place you went for comfort food. It was never fine dining, but it felt familiar. Neighborhood casual with sizzling platters and steak specials that made you feel like you got something a little nicer without breaking the bank. But lately, customers have started asking quiet questions about what exactly is on that plate. The steak looks fine, maybe even smells good. But once you cut into it, the texture doesn't match the picture in your head. One diner described it as spongy. Another said it chewed more like lunch meat than real beef. Former employees and kitchen staff have offered some insight. Many of these steaks come pre-cooked or vacuum-packed, then finished on a flat top or in a microwave, depending on the rush. They arrive frozen, already seasoned, and sometimes already marked with grill lines. One former line cook explained that the sirloin was sliced and sealed in a factory, far from the restaurant itself, with additives and tenderizers included in the packaging. That process doesn't just extend shelf life, it changes the meat. You're not getting a fresh cut. You're getting a reshaped product built to hold up under mass service, not flavor or texture. There's also the issue of meat blends. Some lower-cost steaks are restructured using a technique known as meat glue, enzymes that bind smaller cuts into one piece, then frozen and shipped as a single steak. It's legal, it's industry standard, and it's often invisible to the diner unless they know what to look for. And unless you ask, no one's going to tell you. You see the word steak on the menu, and your mind fills in the rest. Applebee's menus still show those dishes front and center. You'll get a sizzling skillet, some steamed vegetables, maybe a side of mashed potatoes. But the meat in the middle might not be what you expect. It's not that it's fake. It's that it's been processed so far from its original form, the line between real and reassembled gets hard to draw. Most people don't complain. They eat it, feel full, and move on. But there's a reason it doesn't taste the way steak used to. And once you notice it, it's hard to forget. 2. Outback Steakhouse. Outback Steakhouse built its name on boldness. Big flavors, big portions, big personality. The bloomin' onion, the shrimp on the Barbie, the thunder from down under. And at the center of it all, steak. For years, Outback was where families went to celebrate something, even if the celebration was just surviving the week. But behind the spicy seasoning and theatrical presentation, something has quietly shifted. Several longtime customers have said the texture of the steaks doesn't feel the same. Now, it's tougher in some bites, too soft in others. One customer described it as oddly uniform, like they're all shaped the same. That's because they often are. Former kitchen workers have shared that while Outback uses real beef, many cuts arrive pre-portioned, vacuum-sealed, and tenderized with marinades or chemical agents before they ever reach the restaurant. The idea is consistency. Each sirloin the same weight, same look, same cook time. But that uniformity comes at a cost. The flavor isn't coming from the cut anymore, it's coming from what gets added. Seasoning blends, liquid smoke, injected marinades, all designed to create the illusion of richness, even if the meat itself is lower grade than it used to be. Some steaks are needle tenderized in processing plants. Tiny blades punch through the muscle to soften it artificially, but that also breaks down the natural texture. One former prep cook said they were trained to brush extra seasoning over the grill marks to make the steak look grilled, even if it had only touched the flat top. It's not just about shortcuts, it's about volume. Chains like Outback serve thousands of steaks a day across the country. That scale requires efficiency, shelf stability, and minimal waste. That means fewer fresh cuts and more pre-treated products. And the person sitting down to eat rarely knows the difference. The sizzle on the plate, the heavy-handed seasoning, the sauce drizzled just so. It all sells a version of steak that feels real enough. But real enough isn't the same as real. Outback still talks a big game, but the food on the plate tells a quieter story, One of centralized prep kitchens, standardized portions, and meat that's been handled more like a product than a meal. If it still fills you up, maybe that's good enough. But for some, the flavor doesn't bring back the same feeling it used to. 3. Denny's. Denny's isn't where most people go for steak, but it's on the menu, and that's the problem. Tucked between the all-day breakfast and the build-your-own-burger section, there it is. Country fried steak, sirloin steak, and eggs. A meat lover's dream for under $15. It sounds like a deal, but what you get tells a different story. Because when steak is that cheap, something else is paying the price. Denny's has long relied on centralized food prep, frozen shipments, vacuum-sealed portions, and pre-breaded proteins all ready to go from the truck to the plate with minimal effort. Former employees say the steaks arrive frozen solid, already seasoned, already tenderized, and sometimes already fully cooked. "We just heated them," one former line cook shared. "It was more like reheating than cooking." This isn't rare. Many lower-cost diners use similar systems. But what stands out with Denny's is the disconnect between the promise and the plate. The menu shows a hearty grilled steak with a golden crust and thick gravy. What arrives is often grayish, thin, with a texture closer to sausage than sirloin. And that's no accident. Some cuts used for these meals are chopped, formed, and restructured. Essentially processed beef, shaped into a steak-like patty, and then flash frozen. Legal? Yes, obvious. Not unless you know what to look for. Customers often bite in expecting diner nostalgia, a simple steak and eggs breakfast, like the kind you'd get on a road trip years ago. But what they get is a reminder that cost-cutting and convenience have changed even the most basic meals. You still get the eggs, you still get the toast. But the steak? It's something else. And even if the menu doesn't say so, the mouth remembers. 4. Chili's. Chili's is known more for fajitas and burgers than for steak, but that hasn't stopped them from keeping it on the menu. A sizzling plate, a drizzle of sauce, maybe a few shrimp tossed on top. Chili's steak meals are designed to feel bold and satisfying. But beneath the spice and sizzle, there's a different kind of heat. The pressure to cut corners while still looking like quality. And if you've ordered steak there lately, you might have felt it without knowing why. Multiple former kitchen staff have said Chili's steaks come in pre-portioned and pre-seasoned, sometimes marinated for days before they ever hit the grill. The marinade masks inconsistencies in the meat and helps speed up cooking time. One cook explained that steaks are often marked on the grill just long enough to create char lines, then finished in a steamer or oven to bring them up to temp. It looks like it's grilled, but the flavor tells a softer truth, bland in the middle, over-seasoned on the outside, and oddly uniform in texture. And the texture is where things fall apart. Some diners say the steaks chew like deli meat or fall apart more like pulled pork than a real cut of beef. That's often the result of enzyme tenderizers, which break down tough cuts to make them seem softer. But those enzymes also erase the natural grain of the meat. What you're left with feels processed, shaped, almost too soft to be real. The seasoning is strong, almost overpowering. It's not just salt and pepper. It's a blend of spices and liquid smoke, designed to make your brain think steakhouse even if your mouth isn't convinced. And once the sauce goes on, bourbon glaze, garlic butter, ancho chili, you lose the meat entirely. Chili's isn't selling steak. It's selling the idea of steak, built from layers of flavor that cover up what's really underneath. You walk out full, maybe even satisfied. But if you really think about it, the steak didn't bring much to the plate. And when something that used to feel like the main event starts to feel like background noise, that's a quiet sign something has changed. If your forks ever paused mid-bite, wondering what changed, tap like, share that thought below, and subscribe to The Hidden Menu, where we notice what others don't say out loud. 5. IHOP. IHOP has always been about breakfast. Pancakes stacked high, syrup by the bottle, coffee refilled without asking. But as the menu expanded, steak found its way in, often next to eggs or inside a sandwich. And if you've ever ordered it thinking it would round out a hearty breakfast, you probably learned the hard way that it wasn't quite what you hoped for. The steak at IHOP isn't a butcher's cut. It's a convenience item built for speed and shelf life. Former cooks say the sirloins come vacuum sealed, pre-marinated, and shaped to fit the skillet, not the plate. They're stored frozen and dropped into hot pans, still partially stiff, seared just enough to brown, then quickly finished under a clamshell or microwave if the kitchen is busy. And they're almost always busy. Customers have described the texture as wet cardboard or chewy with no flavor. That's because the meat's been softened artificially, sometimes soaked in solution to keep it moist through reheating. One former employee said they often had to press down with a spatula to squeeze the gray liquid out. Not blood, just a mix of water and marinade that steamed up into the air instead of sizzling on the surface. IHOP uses seasoning blends that lean heavily on salt and smoke, trying to force richness into a cut that never had much to begin with. It tastes bold at first, but that fades fast. And by the third bite, you're mostly working through texture. Rubbery edges, soft center, no real chew. Pair it with eggs and hash browns, and it's easy to forget. But order it alone and you start to wonder why it's even on the menu. There was a time when steak and eggs felt like a treat. A hearty, no-nonsense plate that said something about tradition. But at IHOP, it's become something else entirely. An add-on that looks good in a photo but leaves you reaching for the pancakes instead. 6. TGI Fridays. TGI Fridays has always leaned into flavor. Whether it's wings, burgers, or pasta smothered in 3 kinds of cheese, everything on the menu is loud. The steak options are no exception, but that noise can hide a lot, and for many diners, it already has. Ask anyone who's ordered steak there in the last few years, and you'll hear familiar complaints. Overcooked outside, mushy inside, flavor that disappears once the sauce wears off. That's because the steaks aren't really built to stand alone. Former line cooks have said the beef arrives frozen, already marinated, and portioned in exact weights. The seasoning is part of the packaging. You don't salt the steak, you just heat it. Grill marks are often added in a flash sear process, followed by a finishing cook in the oven or under a clamshell to hit the right temperature fast. To the diner, it all looks fine. The steak hits the table next to mashed potatoes, steam rising, maybe a whiskey glaze across the top. But under that glaze is a cut of beef that's been through a dozen steps before it ever hits the grill. It's been tenderized with enzymes, shaped for uniformity, and marinated in bulk to soften the chew. The end result is soft, but not in a good way. There's no pull, no grain, no structure. It's steak-shaped protein with a lot of extra help. And it doesn't hold heat. Customers say their steaks go from hot to lukewarm in minutes, often cooling faster than the sides. That's a red flag in restaurant cooking. Real steak, seared and rested, holds its warmth. These don't. That's because they're designed to look and taste finished fast, not to last. Even the sauces feel like a distraction. Jack Daniel's glaze, Cajun butter, cheesy toppings, they drown the meat in flavor to make up for what's missing underneath. And most customers let it slide. Because the table is loud, the drinks are flowing, and the vibe feels right. But if you slow down and really taste the steak, there's something hollow there. Something that says it's been engineered, not cooked. And once you feel it, the rest of the meal starts to feel different too. 7. Golden Corral. Golden Corral promises abundance. Rows of steam trays, endless meat carving, and the quiet thrill of piling your plate higher than you would at home. But when it comes to steak, that promise gets murky fast. Because even if it's carved in front of you and served with a smile, what's on your plate may not be what you think. Golden Corral steak is often billed as sirloin, but that word doesn't always mean what it used to. Former kitchen workers have explained that cuts are sometimes tenderized, marinated, or processed in bulk to keep them soft, even if they sit under heat lamps for too long. That means the texture is managed more than the meat itself. One former grill cook said the goal wasn't to serve perfect steaks. It was to serve steak-shaped items that cooked quickly, sliced easily, and looked the part. The carving station plays a big role in the illusion. A grill behind the line, steam rising, metal trays catching juices. It all looks like fresh prep. But most of those steaks arrive in large vacuum-sealed bags, pre-portioned and pre-marinated. The seasoning is designed to taste familiar. Salty, peppery, with just enough smoke to seem like it came off a backyard grill. But the real flavor comes from added liquids and binders that help the meat survive long hold times. It's not fake. but it's not what you'd call fresh either. And then there's the texture. Some diners have reported that the steak almost tears apart like pot roast, soft, stringy, and oddly wet. That's usually the result of extended heating in a steamer or warming tray, followed by a quick sear to give it color. It might look medium rare, but that color can be more cosmetic than actual cook level. What you're tasting isn't just meat, it's meat that's been managed. Golden Corral works hard to make sure no one walks away hungry. But when you sit down and realize your steak has no bite, no grain, and no real chew, that feeling of abundance turns into something else. Something quieter, something that makes you wonder what's been traded for convenience. 8. Texas Roadhouse. Texas Roadhouse feels like the last holdout. Buckets of peanuts, hand-cut steaks, loud country music, and servers who line dance between tables. For years, it's been marketed as the real deal, a steakhouse that still takes pride in the cut. And for many, it still feels that way, but not always, and not everywhere. Multiple former employees have said the steaks are indeed cut in-house, but that doesn't mean the same care goes into every step. Some locations prioritize speed over quality, especially on busy nights. One former prep cook shared that staff were trained to trim meat quickly and store it in brine or butter marinades to soften tougher cuts. And while the beef may technically be fresh, what's done to it can change the way it tastes. Customers have reported steaks that come out gray in the middle, overly soft, or covered in so much seasoning they can't tell what the meat actually tastes like. That's not by accident. The seasoning blend used at many locations is heavy on salt, garlic, and smoked paprika, designed to mimic grilled flavor even when the sear is weak. And if the steak sits too long in the prep marinade, that artificial tenderness takes over. It's easy to chew. Too easy. The grill is real, but even that has its shortcuts. Some steaks are marked quickly and then moved to a lower heat area or oven to finish. It gets the job done faster, but it also means your steak might look grilled on the outside and feel steamed on the inside. Former servers have admitted that when guests send steaks back, it's often because the texture doesn't match what the menu promised. People expect a bite, but sometimes it just mushes. Texas Roadhouse still does better than many chains, but the cracks are showing. Consistency across locations varies, and as the brand grows, shortcuts are easier to miss. The steak might still come from a block of real meat, but everything done to it after that can take it further from what a steak should be. You eat it, you feel full, and maybe you even leave happy. But later you start to wonder if you really got what you paid for, or if it was just dressed up to feel that way. Steak used to be a signal. You didn't eat it every day, you waited for it. You looked forward to it. And when it landed on your plate, sizzling, tender, cooked just right, it meant something. A birthday, a celebration, a good week, or a rare night out that felt like a reward. But today the word steak is everywhere. It's in diners, drive-thrus, combo meals, and late-night delivery apps. It's offered fast, priced low, dressed up in sauces and glazes and clever marketing. And slowly, quietly, what steak once stood for has started to fade. Because the truth is, not all steak is what it seems. Behind those familiar words, sirloin, ribeye, T-bone, are supply chains, processing plants, frozen shipments, enzyme baths, and prep kitchens, trained to make everything look consistent. No matter what actually lands on the grill, it's not about craftsmanship anymore. It's about scale. And with scale comes compromise. A lot of these meals aren't trying to fool you outright, but they're hoping you don't ask too many questions. They're counting on the sauce to distract you, on the seasoning to cover the texture, on the sides and the music and the mood to make you forget that the meat in the middle doesn't feel quite right. And most of the time it works. You take a few bites, talk to your friend, dip into your mashed potatoes, and move on. But if you stop and really taste it, if you slow down long enough to notice, it's hard to ignore what's missing. And what's missing isn't just marbling or flavor, it's meaning. The kind of meal that felt earned, that lingered in your memory. Not because it was fancy, but because it was real. So the next time you're served a steak that cuts like sponge or chews like paste, ask yourself, is this what it used to be? Or is it just another product, shaped to look like a memory? If you've ever taken a bite and quietly wondered the same thing, share your story in the comments. Give this video a soft like and subscribe to the hidden menu so you never get fooled by the plate in front of you again. And remember, The truth is not always on the menu.